lowest and most sheltered corner of the dell, they lit a fire and prepared a meal. The shades of evening began to fall, and it grew cold. They were suddenly aware of great hunger, for they had not eaten anything since breakfast, but they dared not make more than a frugal supper. The lands ahead were empty of all save birds and beasts, unfriendly places deserted by all the races of the world. Rangers passed at times beyond the hills, but they were few and did not stay. Other wanderers were rare. Trolls might stray down at times out of the northern valleys of the Misty Mountains. Only on the road would travelers be found, most often dwarves, hurrying along on business of their own, and with no help and few words to spare for strangers.
Well, hello there, traveler.
Welcome to the Lighthouse. Welcome, traveler. Glad you could join me in the lighthouse, and especially in the library of the lighthouse. Now, as this is likely your first visit, take up a chair, stay a while. These vast halls contain stories that would take a lifetime to peruse and glean from, and we're going to look at as many as we can, piece by piece, passage by passage, wherever the light seems to be shining from, that's where we'll go. And today, the light is shining from a passage in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, a masterful and wondrous adventure of finding hope in unlikely places and the struggle against evil. Now earlier, outside our doors, we heard a bit about where we are in this story. The hobbits have just left the village of Bree, and they just had to put their trust in a man called Strider, who seems to be this new ally, although they're still a bit unsure about him. They're also worried because Gandalf has yet to meet up with their company, and Black Riders are hunting them. So, let's begin there, where they're out in the wild, and let's see where the light is shining from today.
"I don't see how our food can be made to last," said Frodo. "We have been careful enough in the last few days, and this supper is no feast. But we have used more than we ought. If we have 2 weeks still to go, and perhaps more."
"There is food in the wild," said Strider. "Berry, root, and herb, and I have some skill as a hunter at need. You need not be afraid of starving before winter comes. But gathering and catching food is long and weary work, and we need haste, so tighten your belts, and think with hope of the tables of Elrond's house."
The cold increased as darkness came on. Peering out from the edge of the dell, they could see nothing but a gray land now vanishing quickly into shadow. Above had cleared again, and was slowly filled with twinkling stars. Frodo and his companions huddled round the fire, wrapped in every garment and blanket they possessed. But Strider was content with a single cloak, and sat a little apart, drawing thoughtfully at his pipe. As night fell and the light of the fire began to shine out brightly, he began to tell them tales to keep their minds from fear. He knew many histories and legends of long ago, of elves and men and the good and evil deeds of the elder days. They wondered how old he was, and where he had learned all this lore. "Tell us of Gil-galad," said Merry suddenly, when he paused at the end of a story of the elf kingdoms. "Do you know any more of the old lay that you spoke of?"
"I do indeed," answered Strider. "So also does Frodo, for it concerns us closely."
Merry and Pippin looked at Frodo, who was staring into the fire.
"I know only the little that Gandalf has told me," said Frodo slowly.
"Gil-galad was the last of the great elf kings of Middle-earth. Gil-galad is starlight in their tongue. With Elendil, the elf friend, he went to the land of—"
"No," said Strider, interrupting. "I do not think that tale should be told now with the servants of the enemy at hand. If we win through to the house of Elrond, you may hear it there, told in full."
"Then tell us some other tale of the old days," begged Sam. "A tale about the elves before the fading time. I would dearly like to hear more about elves. The dark seems to press round so close."
Our passage ends there. Now, I'd love to hear what light you're finding from this passage, as well as the other passages that we'll read from here on out. Here's some light that I'm finding from that passage. When I read this, the hobbits are really worried. But what does Strider do to help them from being afraid or from being overcome by their fear? It says in there that he tells them tales to keep their minds from fear. I can envision the hobbits around their fire, Strider sitting there. They're putting their trust in this man, but they know that there's darkness behind them and that they have to trust this man to hopefully get them through to Rivendell. And in order for Strider, to help them be less afraid, he tells them stories. He tells them stories of days gone by with elf kingdoms, the elder days, and it is the telling them from being or from falling into fear. What does that mean for you and I? Like, what stories are we telling ourselves? Is there a story when you grew up that your parents or someone would read to you that you're really fond of and that maybe you recall in times of turmoil? I feel like the light from this passage is asking all of us, what stories do we tell to keep our minds from fear? There's a scripture in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 in the New Testament that says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." I think we could also read that as, God has not given us stories of fear, but stories of power, stories of love, and stories of a sound mind. Those are the type of stories that God would want us to be telling, to be seeking, and to be believing, because those are the stories that are true. Now, albeit there are, of course, fictional stories, right? Stories that are not actually occurring in our reality, but still teach us those true principles. Right, you? What are the stories that you're seeking? And what are the stories that you're finding that give you that power, that love, and of a sound mind? Thank you so much for visiting the Lighthouse today, traveler. We're very grateful you came. Now, before you do go, I want to share with you a final thought. And this final thought comes from author Neil Gaiman, which I feel really connects to this idea of how stories can keep our minds from fear. He said, "Fairy tales aren't true because they show us that dragons exist. Tales are true because they show us that dragons can be beaten." I love that passage. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you in the Lighthouse again next time.